December 28th, 1956. Two teenage sisters walked out of a Chicago movie theater after watching Elvis Presley's new film, Love Me Tender. They were excited, giggling about the king of rock and roll, planning to see the movie again. They never made it home. What happened to Barbara and Patricia Grimes would become one of Chicago's most disturbing and heartbreaking unsolved mysteries, a case that would haunt investigators for decades and leave a community forever changed. Barbara Grimes was 15 years old, a bright-eyed sophomore with dreams of becoming a secretary. Her younger sister, Patricia, was just 13, a seventh grader with an infectious smile and a love for rock and roll music. The sisters were inseparable, best friends who did everything together. They lived with their mother, Loretta Grimes, and their siblings on the southwest side of Chicago, in a modest but loving home. Like millions of teenage girls across America in 1956, Barbara and Patricia were absolutely crazy about Elvis Presley. They had seen Love Me Tender multiple times already at the Brighton Theater, just a short bus ride from their home. The movie had been released earlier that month, and the girls couldn't get enough of it. They had Elvis records, Elvis pictures cut from magazines, and spent hours talking about him. On the evening of December 28th, it was just another trip to see their idol on the silver screen. Their mother gave them permission to go, as she had done before. It was a Friday night, and the girls promised to be home by midnight. It seemed like such a normal evening, the kind of evening that happens in families everywhere. How could anyone have known it would be the last time Loretta would see her daughters alive? Barbara and Patricia left their home around 7:30 p.m., catching the bus toward the Brighton Theater. Multiple witnesses would later confirm seeing them at the theater that night. They watched Love Me Tender one more time, likely singing along to Elvis's songs in their heads, lost in the magic of the movies. The film ended around 11 p.m. Security guard Frank Kuchera was one of the last people to see the girls alive. He remembered them leaving the theater, chatting and laughing as they walked out into the cold Chicago night. They were heading toward the bus stop, the same route they'd taken home many times before. And then they disappeared. When midnight came and went with no sign of the girls, Loretta Grimes began to worry. By 1 a.m., worry turned to panic. By dawn, she knew something was terribly wrong. Her daughters had never stayed out all night. They were good girls, responsible girls. Something had happened. Loretta immediately called the police, but in 1956, missing teenagers weren't always taken seriously at first. Police initially suggested the girls might have run away, perhaps to Nashville to try to meet Elvis Presley. This theory devastated Loretta. She knew her daughters would never do such a thing. But a mother's intuition would prove tragically correct. As hours turned into days, the case exploded into one of the largest missing persons searches in Chicago's history. Thousands of volunteers combed the streets, parks, and vacant lots. The story made national headlines. Elvis Presley himself made a public plea for the girls to come home if they had run away, saying, "If you are good Presley fans, you'll go home and ease your mother's worries." The entire city held its breath, hoping for a miracle. Instead, they got a nightmare. On January 22nd, 1957, 25 days after the girls vanished, a construction worker named Leonard Prescott was driving along German Church Road in southwest suburban Willow Springs when he spotted something in a ditch along the roadside. Getting closer, his blood ran cold. It was the bodies of Barbara and Patricia Grimes. The sisters were found lying side by side, unclothed, partially frozen in the snow. They had been left in a drainage ditch like trash, discarded and forgotten. The discovery sent shockwaves through Chicago and across the nation. The city's worst fears had been realized. The autopsy results were both crucial and controversial. According to Cook County coroner Dr. Harry Gloss, the girls had died from exposure to freezing temperatures. But this finding raised more questions than answers. If they had died from exposure on December 28th, why did their bodies show only minimal decomposition after 25 days in winter weather? Some experts suggested the bodies had been kept elsewhere and dumped more recently. There were other troubling details. Small puncture wounds were found on Patricia's body. Both girls had been subjected to some form of violence before death, though the exact nature and extent remained unclear due to the condition of the bodies. The investigation that followed was massive, but deeply flawed. In the 1950s, forensic science was in its infancy. Evidence collection methods were primitive by today's standards. Crucial clues may have been missed or contaminated. Over the following months and years, several suspects emerged, but none were ever charged. Edward Benny Bedwell, a drifter with a criminal record, confessed to killing the girls, but his confession was riddled with inconsistencies and details that didn't match the known facts. After intense interrogation, he recanted, claiming police had coerced him. Despite polygraph tests and psychiatric evaluations, prosecutors didn't have enough evidence to charge him. Another suspect was Walter Krantz, who lived near where the bodies were found. He had made suspicious statements and had a history of violence, but again, no concrete evidence linked him to the crime. Several other individuals came under scrutiny over the decades. Some were investigated because of tips from the public, others because of deathbed confessions or jailhouse statements. But every lead eventually went cold. The case file grew to thousands of pages, filled with witness statements, forensic reports, and investigative dead ends. But justice for Barbara and Patricia remained elusive. The Grimes case changed Chicago. Parents became more protective of their children. The carefree innocence of the 1950s, already beginning to fade, took another blow. Movie theaters implemented stricter policies about unaccompanied minors. For Loretta Grimes, life became a living nightmare. She spent the rest of her days seeking answers, never giving up hope that her daughter's killer would be found. She died in 1989, more than 30 years after losing her girls, without ever knowing the truth. The Brighton Theater, where the sisters saw their last movie, is long gone now, torn down and replaced by other buildings. German Church Road, where they were found, has been renamed, but the memory of Barbara and Patricia Grimes endures. More than 6 decades later, the Grimes sisters' case remains officially unsolved. Modern investigators have occasionally revisited the evidence using new forensic techniques, but the trail has gone cold. Most of the original witnesses are deceased. Physical evidence has degraded or been lost. But questions still haunt those who study this case. Where were the girls between December 28th and January 22nd? Why were there so few signs of decomposition on the bodies? Who were the witnesses who claimed to have seen the girls alive days after they disappeared? Why were some eyewitness accounts never fully investigated? Could modern DNA testing finally provide answers if any viable evidence still exists? It's easy to get lost in the mystery, the investigation, the suspects, and the theories. But at the heart of this case are 2 young girls who had their entire lives ahead of them. Barbara wanted to be a secretary, to have a career, maybe a family of her own someday. Patricia was just discovering who she was, her personality still forming, her potential unlimited. They loved Elvis Presley. They loved going to the movies together. They loved their mother and their family. They were typical teenagers with typical dreams. They deserved to grow up. They deserved to live their lives. Instead, they became victims of a crime that shook a city and has never been solved. Today, true crime enthusiasts, amateur detectives, and professional investigators still discuss the Grimes sisters' case. Internet forums debate theories, podcasts examine the evidence. Books have been written analyzing every angle. The Chicago Police Department's cold case unit maintains the file, always hoping that new information or technology will finally crack the case. In an era of genetic genealogy solving decades-old crimes, there's renewed hope that DNA evidence, if any viable samples still exist, might finally identify the killer. But even if the case is never officially solved, Barbara and Patricia Grimes will not be forgotten. Their story serves as a reminder of innocence lost, of a time when a trip to the movies could end in tragedy, and of two sisters whose bond was so strong that even in death, they were found side by side. The Brighton Theatre marquee may be long dark, and Love Me Tender may be a distant memory, but the search for justice for the Grimes sisters continues, because Barbara and Patricia deserve more than to be another unsolved mystery. They deserve to be remembered as the bright, loving young girls they were, and they deserve the truth. This case remains under investigation by the Chicago Police Department. If you have any information about the deaths of Barbara and Patricia Grimes, please contact the Chicago Police Cold Case Unit. Even the smallest detail could be the key to finally solving this decades-old mystery and bringing peace to the memory of two innocent young girls.